Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Tech Talks Daily podcast. I'm your host, Neil C. Hughes, and I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to connect with so many of the brightest minds in the business and tech world. And every day we discuss the latest trends, emerging technologies and predictions for a digital future. And most importantly, how as individuals and as a business we can thrive together. And today's guest is a special one indeed, because I've got with me the Managing Director and Lead for Accenture's annual Technology Vision report, aptly titled When Atoms Meet Bits, the Foundations of Our New Reality. Now, Michael and his team at Accenture have been tracking intersections of the digital and physical worlds, charting how this convergence is set to transform industries over the next decade. And according to the report, a staggering 96% of executives all agree in unison that this blending of realms will be pivotal for their respective industries. And one of the game changers highlighted in the report is the arrival of foundation models in AI, described as one of the most significant milestones in the history of AI. And these multitasking, versatile models are changing the way businesses strategize their AI deployments and applications. So in this digital era, I want to learn more about all this and how data transparency has become a vital asset, and hopefully Michael will shed some light on how business leaders can better leverage this transparency and turn it into a strategic advantage by understanding the technology that shapes it and why these conditions will continue to accelerate. And there's a lot of talk also at the moment about what impact AI will have on the workplace, and the fact that the report uncovered that up to 40% of all working hours could be supported or even augmented by language-based AI. And 98% of business leaders seeing that the critical role of AI foundation models in their organisation strategies over the next 3 to 5 years means that the impact on productivity and efficiency could be transformative, but there's a lot of responsibilities around this, and it's a topic I'm looking forward to finding out more about. So buckle up and hold on tight, because no matter where you're listening in the world, I'm going to be beaming your ears all the way to San Francisco, where Michael Blitz is going to be talking about all this and much more. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Michael Blitz. I'm a managing director out of Accenture's Technology Labs, and it's essentially my job to look 10 years out to set Accenture's technology vision that we use both to guide our internal research as well as to talk to most of our clients about what's coming, what's changing, what are the big disruptions, and what are the big opportunities that everybody should be preparing for now.
Wow, I mean, that sounds like an incredibly cool role, but also incredibly challenging. I mean, we go back 8 months ago, I suspect that when people were writing their predictions for 2023, very few people saw Gen AI come in, and very few people saw Threads coming along and just cloning Twitter and getting 100 million users in 5 days. It must be incredibly challenging, a role like that.
It is, but honestly, you'd be surprised at how many things are more predictable than what you'd expect. Yeah, so you take the Gen AI piece, we've been looking at and we've been talking about Gen AI for the past 3 years.
Yeah.
And I think what we saw was what ChatGPT did was it didn't change what we thought was going to happen. It rather just accelerated who was actually looking at this. Because the reality is that we've spent, as Accenture the last, 14 months working with a lot of our clients on very specific applications of this. And the release of ChatGPT is what that did is it basically showed the entire world that this was possible. And that just took us from, taking spot projects, here and there where we're really trying to dig in to suddenly, and you saw Accenture's investment is that we invested $3 billion in AI. And that's not because it was a surprise to us coming. Rather, it's us realizing the scale of the number of people who want to work with this and deal with this right now, went from just the leading edge companies to pretty much everybody.
Such a great point. And one of the things that put you on my radar was the Accenture 2023 Tech Vision report. And just to set the scene for today's conversation, can you tell me a little bit more about the report and for anyone listening, just hearing about it for the first time?
Yeah, so 20 years ago, we were doing this internally for ourselves. What we recognized is that the vast majority of the surprises for most companies in terms of disruptions that seem to come out of left field, as well as just frankly brand new opportunities of things you could be doing, products, new services, how to make yourself more efficient. Most of these things were being driven by technological advances. And so what we were doing for our R&D group was purely for our own investments, trying to keep a constant pulse of what was going on. And at some point in time, we realized that we were actually presenting and talking about these findings more with our clients than we were doing internally. And so that took us from a shift from, well, maybe this isn't an internal project. Maybe this is something that we need to publish yearly. And so every year we go through a massively extensive route of trying to keep pulse from academia, from tech, to every company that's using digital technology to figure out what's going on, what they're doing it. And then we put our own spin on it, which was, all right, if I can actually understand what the advancements are, what's the real opportunity and who's going to get disrupted by it? And that culminates every year in our vision report, which is essentially, half of it is a guide to what's changing, and the other half, is basically a roadmap for companies to start looking at what they need to be doing now in order to prep for the future that's coming.
And one of the things that stood out to me in the report was the suggestion that 96% of executives believe that the convergence of digital and physical worlds could actually transform their industry within the next decade. So can you tell me a bit more about what this convergence might look like and how it could potentially reshape various industries, and some of which you probably don't associate with technology as well?
No, I think that's right, is that what we've seen is that over the last decade, most companies have invested pretty heavily in building up, their technology capabilities. And now that companies, and I mean every company, and whether you're talking about, Quaker Oats or L'Oreal or GM, is that these are all real tech companies now because they have to be. And what's happening now is that we're starting to take that technology and it's actually starting to come out into the real world. And what we're really looking at is this when atoms meets bits moment that says, how do I look at how companies are going to change when I stop looking at my phone or my laptop as the primary way that technology is going to affect the world, and start looking at a world that's fundamentally becoming digital? And the neat part about it is that when you really start to look, this digital physical world, it's kind of starting everywhere, and it's doing new and fun things. So let me give you a couple examples. So you look at something like the NFL of the US, so American football, is essentially they now track players to the point where they're getting 10 bursts of data every second. And they're using this to track how hard the players are being hit in order to monitor for things like concussions. They're creating new statistics to be able to, in real time, based off of how fast the players are accelerating, how close they are to each other, determine whether, a pass is going to be received, whether a team is likely going to score, and constantly updating to understand what the probability of what the outcome of the overall match is going to be. And that's just in sports. You start to talk about other industries that you wouldn't expect, is companies like L'Oreal are now looking at, how do I use computers in order to apply makeup? They're looking at, not just beauty projects in the real world. They're looking at how do I take things in augmented reality and virtual reality and realize, well, people are going to want to look good in whatever format that they have, and whether that's on a Zoom call, or a avatar, for you in virtual reality, is that the idea that somebody wants to present their best self, that's still real. And so they're basically involving themselves, from a makeup company to a digital company. And that's a really crazy and profound difference, of how we see this digital and physical, changing the way that companies are going to look at their world, their opportunity, and their products.
And of course, with the advancements of AI, I think unlocking value across a smorgasbord of data almost is another expectation. But one of the things that caught my attention again in the report, it was the arrival of foundation models. Can you tell me about that as a significant change in AI history, and also shed light on on how these models work and how they're forcing businesses to maybe revise their old school AI strategy?
Yeah, so I think the foundation models are important, because essentially what we're looking at is moving away from single-use, single-purpose AI. So if you kind of look at most of what's being done today, is that people are pretty used to, I have a specific problem, I think AI is going to use it, and so I'm going to build and train an AI bot in order to do it. I know that mortgage companies will use it to say, "Hi, how can I quickly look at a mortgage application, figure out whether this person is a safe enough risk for a given loan." And so you basically create a bot that does that. The problem is that it only does that. And I think what we're seeing now is that with these foundation models is that we're realizing that we can essentially start to create bots that have a much wider variety of the things that they can do and build upon it. So instead of reinventing the wheel every time, now we're talking about foundation models that says it can hold a conversation with somebody. It can move a robotic arm in a factory. It can do a analysis for something like a mortgage, but it also has the ability to provide, some amount of customer service. And the idea that it may not be perfect at everything, but it's good at a lot of things is really opening people's minds up that says, how do I start thinking about AI not as a piece of software that I'm going to point at one particular problem, but rather a personal assistant for folks who's going to be able to help them on their daily lives, to help them in their daily jobs and what they're doing.
And interestingly, and some would probably argue predictably, data transparency is also mentioned as a strategic advantage in the report because it is such a big talking point right now. So how can business leaders improve their understanding of the technology shaping data transparency, and why are conditions demanding greater transparency likely to accelerate in the future? Because that certainly seems to be the way it's heading.
It really is. And I think a lot of this, is, it's partially driven by AI that says if I've got something like ChatGPT out there that is going to be able to answer my questions, it's basically searching through a treasure trove of information, available publicly and pulling all that information in. And so now suddenly it's not talking about a giant research project, to get to data, whether it's somebody's personal data or company data. It's a matter of if somebody's going to ask the question, you have access to that data. And I think similarly, you look on other pieces that says companies are demanding from their partners that they have that data too. That says if they want to have an effective supply chain, everybody wants to know from who's digging it, digging the materials out of the ground to the people who are building the parts in the manufacturing plant, to assembling it, to ordering it, to delivering it to the customers, to how they're using it, is that there's a huge amount of value and efficiency to unlock in having all of that data. And I think what we've finally come to this interesting realization is that we've been trying to talk about privacy, and we've been trying to talk about transparency for a long time in the future, we should probably think about this, and we keep moving towards a world that's becoming more transparent, but I'll worry about those issues that cause, when we get to it. And I think we've finally gotten to a point now that we've realized that no matter how many red flags people push up that says, hey, should we be doing this? No, we are moving towards this. The amount of data that we are going to have about our employees, about our customers, about our business itself, and the amount of information that our customers are going to have about the companies, how they run, how they build their product, is going to be immense. And so I think where we're really pushing right now is this idea that says, stop thinking about transparency as should we be transparent, and realize that no, whether we want to or not, the world is going to be transparent. And now it's going to be up to us to have the tools in place so that we can, one, take advantage of the opportunities and say, hey, can I make my supply chain, more efficient? Can I make my, employees more productive? But then also put the safeguards into it that says, how do we make sure that we're not trampling on people's privacy? How do we make sure we're not trampling on people's rights? And how do we keep the information that exists, in the hands of the folks, that it should be, and not in the hands of the folks who are going to abuse it? And that's a lot.
It is. And on top of that, I think digital identity technologies also seem to be solving a lot of the previous issues that we've seen in this space. So can I ask you to tell the listeners a little bit more about how these technologies are also evolving and the impact that they're likely to have on the future of digital identity? Because again, another big topic, right?
No, it's a huge topic. And honestly, it's one that it tends to get almost dismissed. And I think it's actually one of the most important things, because it's a foundation of how we're basically going to be building the next decade of technology. And I think the easiest way to look at it is almost look at the past. So if you remember, there's a good and bad way, the digital identity is going to change the way that the world works. And so the bad way says back in the early aughts is the music industry did not create a way to individually identify each of the songs that they were selling. And basically what that led to is the moment the technology advanced enough for people to be able to take a CD, put it to their computer, and rip a song off of it, is that there was no way to buy, sell, transact, track, or anything else on those. And you basically had an industry that essentially lost a huge amount of its revenue and control over its product for 15 years before they finally are able to reel it back. And you could probably question as to how far they've been able to reel it back even now. And so you look at that and it says the problem with that was they didn't really create a digital identity for what the new market was going to be for music. Now, on the other side of that is the Walmart was the first company to globally require themselves and all of their suppliers to use RFID tags. And essentially they were creating an individual identity for every single product that they had coming into their store. And they used that mercilessly to create a extraordinarily efficient supply chain and basically dominated the market and their competitors by being more efficient than they were and how they got their goods from manufacturer to the consumer. And where we're seeing now is that suddenly when you're talking about the metaverse, when suddenly you're talking about driverless cars, you're talking about digital assistants, all of these things are fundamentally also going to need that identity in order to be able to do those next things. And so when you look at a company like Sotheby's, who is currently selling NFTs, is the point is not that they are selling a NFT of a monkey for $12 million. Rather, the point is they've realized that in order to be able to buy and sell digital art in a online marketplace, is that you have to be able to individually identify these things. And so what we're seeing now is that we're just bubbling up where people are starting to ask that question that says, from people to objects to entirely digital imaginary things, how do we create that infrastructure of ID in the background to create that next generation of essentially a digital? And it's super, super interesting and exciting, to see that, starting to blossom up right now.
And the report also indicates as much as 40% of all working hours will be supported or augmented by language-based AI. And I am a positive eternal optimist, and I like to think that the magic happens when humans and machines complement each other rather than compete. But some businesses might be tempted to take that short-sighted approach of reducing headcount. So there is understandably a lot of concern in this area, and we've all seen those headlines, but I'd love to try and get a positive slant on this. So can you provide some examples of how you might see this manifesting in the day-to-day operations of various businesses? I'm curious what you think or what you think will happen here.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things, and I think one of those near-term things that we're going to start to see, is really the idea of how employees get help.
Yeah.
If you think about it, if you close your eyes and you remember the olden days, when every executive in a company, had a assistant, the reality is that the world doesn't kind of work like that anymore. But as companies like Microsoft and their Copilots are just about to be released, what we're now talking about is handing everybody essentially an AI assistant. And eventually that will get to a point that it won't just be company people, but it'll be consumers too. And what you can imagine is you close your eyes, and for everybody who works with a computer at all, as a part of their daily jobs, you start to take the mundane and obviously tedious tasks, and you start to basically verbally or written ask your assistant to do it. Can you figure out, what the latest statistic was in order to put into a PowerPoint presentation? Can you take the work that you've been writing that says you're doing an efficiency report and ask it to summarize it and put it into an email update or a status report for your boss? The idea, that you can ask it to go run the queries to figure out, who are the meetings that you have today? What information are you going to need? What is their, sales report that for the last year? Is that suddenly all of these things that are not, earth-shattering tasks, but small little things that take up large parts of your day that aren't the real value that you as a human are providing. Suddenly we're talking about basically having assistants that are going to be slowly trained over the next few years in order to be able to do all of those things instantaneously, and I think it's just going to make people much more productive, and it's going to keep them from doing the parts of the job, that frankly are repetitive and they don't really want to do anymore.
And another big, powerful stat in the report from 98% of respondents is that they all agree in unison that AI foundation models will play a crucial role in their organization strategies over the next few years. So for business leaders hearing about this for the first time, how should businesses prepare themselves to fully leverage these models?
I mean, I think for one, I'd be surprised if anybody was hearing about it for the first time.
Yeah.
There's been more hype and I think more transparency into the existence of these models. I think where we get to next is that preparation that you're talking about is talking about the reality of it. Yeah. And the reality of it that says, yeah, you can do all of those things, that I just said and more, for how you're going to be able to increase your efficiency. But you also have to realize there's a bunch of things that are going to come along with it that are going to be new tasks for your company. And so you start asking a question that says, all right, so I'm going to ask a foundation model to help create a PowerPoint, and it's going to create that base, presentation that I'm going to give next week based off of my work. Well, where is it drawing your information from? Is it only from information from in your company, or is it drawing information from outside of your company? Who's monitoring where that information comes? Are you allowed to use that? Is it something that I can consume because it's on the internet, but I can't actually present as my own work? Does the company, because right now we're talking about external companies who are running these foundation models. Do they own the things that I'm creating? Do I own it? Can I copyright it? Can, my competitors, steal it? What happens if I'm pointing to sensitive things on my own databases? Am I giving a new window to the world into my pieces, and then crazy things that says, all right, so now I have an AI, in the background that says, I've walled it off. They're only using my own company information. And you go, man, there's a lot of outdated information when I think about, my own company and looking at the 20, 30 years of archives of information that it could be drawing from. How am I making sure that it's only pulling the current information? That it's not, pulling out irrelevant information that may have been true 15 years ago. And there's lots of nuances to all of this. And I think that the important piece for everybody to realize is that, one, what they're seeing is real. Is the AI is here and it is mature enough to start doing these things, but you're not talking about a plug and play that says, I'm just going to throw it in and everything's going to work. What you're talking about is changing the way that you think about data, changing the way that people work. And that's going to really create I'm going to say an enormous transformation project, because that's what they're talking about doing. You're transforming the way that your employees work, your customer works, because now it's less of a software implementation. And I think people are going to have to look at AI as more of a new type of employee, than a new software product that I screw in.
The report also identifies generative AI, digital identity, data management, and the feedback loop between science and technology as key trends. So I'm curious, if we zoom out for a minute, how do these trends interact and what potential do they hold when maybe leveraged together?
Yeah, these trends really represent the newest set of pillars in order to create that digital physical blend.
Yeah.
So when we talk about, the world coming alive, is that what we realize is that if it's going to happen and it's going to work well, is that you have to have an identity for everything. Like it just, in order just fundamentally to make it work, you have to realize that the amount of transparency that you're going to need to make things actually work well and smooth, is going to be enormous, but you're also going to have to protect all the people that if I have a digitally transparent world and everything that I'm interacting with, is that suddenly the safeguards become enormous. You have to fill this world with things that are going to make decisions. There's not enough people on the planet to create all the digital and virtual worlds that we're going to want to consume. There's not enough people on the planet in order to be able to help us with every question and every mundane task that we're going to ask as we interact with this new world. And that's where generative AI suddenly becomes an enormous piece that says, we're not really talking about how humans are getting replaced. Rather, we're talking about expanding the scope of what we can do to such a large point that AI is realistically going to be the only option that says who's managing those decisions, who's helping people, through it, because there's just not enough to do it. And then you suddenly get to the science tech piece and you start saying, well, it's not just a digital overlay. We're actually starting to create smart materials. We're starting to use technology to, change our genetics, to monitor our health in real time. And suddenly the world itself, the objects itself are coming alive too. And all of these things pulled together, essentially is moving us towards this new living digital world that we see, burgeoning, right now, but really starting to take shape over the next decade.
And finally, I think the preparing for a future dominated by AI can both be exciting and daunting in equal measure for businesses and the people inside those businesses. So I was also intrigued that I learned that Accenture set up a Gen AI and large language model center of excellence. So can you tell me more about this center's goals and how it ultimately plans to drive the adoption of these disruptive technologies?
No, that's right. So we've recently are investing $3 billion into our data and AI practice. And I think specifically it's around this idea that AI is essentially going to become essential to every business, and I think more and more as we've seen the huge amount of adoption, of, generative AI over the last year, is that we believe that it's going to similarly have an impact on employees, and eventually consumers are going to start to adopt this too. And so what we've basically done is that we're taking that big bet and saying, we know this is the future. There is no future where we're going to be able to handle this living world without AI as a fundamental part of it. And so what we've done is we've created this giant center of excellence, which is partly going to be our way to train up and skill up the sheer amount of experts that we're going to need to be able to help everybody. And then also start to take it and realize that it's not one industry. It's not one problem. It's every industry and every problem. And so we're basically starting to, combine, every industry expert that we have with a technology expert, to essentially take us to that next step of not just is AI important or is generative AI going to be a part of my business, but to start to figure out the use cases of how every industry is actually going to use it. And that's what we're pushing. And honestly, I think it's going to be one of those things that in 5 years, nobody's going to talk about generative AI anymore because it's just going to be assumed that it's a part of how you do your business.
Wow, that's a powerful moment to end on. And I am conscious we've bombarded everyone listening with a smorgasbord of information today. There's going to be a lot of things that people might want to take a little bit of a deeper dive into. So for anyone listening that wants to access that report or have a look at what Accenture's doing on any of the topics we discussed today, is there any way you'd like to point everyone?
Yep. Everybody can go to www.accenture.com/techvision or just Google Accenture Technology Vision, and you will find the report, executive summary, statistics, and all the information you could possibly want there and more. And if you got any questions, obviously just reach out to us.
Well, so many big takeaways in our conversation today. From that 96% of executives agreeing that the convergence of digital and physical worlds over the next decade will transform their industry. The arrival of foundation models, one of the biggest step changes in AI history. Data transparency is becoming a strategic advantage, and digital identity also quietly catalysing the next generation of technology disruption. I urge anyone to check out that report. So much gold in there. But more than anything, just a big thank you to you, Michael, for coming on here and bringing the entire topic to life. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been fun.
So as we wrap up today's episode of Tech Talks Daily, I just want to extend a big thank you to our guests for sharing insightful perspectives and exciting predictions based on this 2023 Tech Vision report. And I think that convergence of digital and physical worlds and how it's reshaping our reality, it's certainly given me something to think about. And from the advent of foundation models in AI to the game-changing role of digital identity technologies, I think we covered a vast array of pivotal tech trends as we all continue to witness the evolution of the metaverse, digital twins, augmented reality, robotics. There's no doubt that we're on the precipice of a digital revolution here. So a big thank you to Michael for offering us a little glimpse into the future of technology and for reminding us on the transformative role of AI and how it's poised to play a pivotal role in business strategies in the coming years. And as businesses do adapt and evolve in this digital age, I think the ideas and insights from today's discussion, I hope, will be invaluable to you. But it may have also sparked a few other ideas and maybe a few concerns. So please, I encourage you to share those with me. Email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, Instagram, Threads, LinkedIn, wherever you hang out, just look for me at Neil C. Hughes. Nice and easy to find there. Let me know your thoughts. If you want me to read something out, if you want to join me on the podcast, if you've got a question, whatever it is, I'm here for you all. But that's it for today. So keep your messages coming in. I'll return again tomorrow with another guest as always. But just a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.